And also, earlier in our conversation, did you say that you had debate experience, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, because I was gonna ask as well, because I have to ask about Jubilee, of course.
Yes.
Uh, how 'Cause I assume you apply to get on. Can you just, like, I guess, give us a full explanation of the whole entire Jubilee process? 'Cause you've gone on there more than twice or just twice?
Just twice.
Okay, just twice, like, that's not more than everyone else has ever gone on. But, yeah, can you just explain the whole process to us? I'm very, very curious to hear that.
So all of Jubilee's casting calls are public on their website. It's just like jubilee.com or jubileemedia.com/casting. And all of their episodes, people from across the world can apply to. They get a lot of applications, and I'd been on their list for years. Even when I was a Catholic, when I was a Catholic, I was like, "What if I went on one of these episodes?" Um, and I got one of my friends onto the pro-life versus pro-choice teen abortion debate on the middle ground as a traditional Catholic. I essentially got off of their mailing list when I was trying to rethink all of my beliefs. And then with my YouTube channel, I was doing a few different debates, and I was like, "Oh yeah, Jubilee is a thing. Maybe I should apply to something." And so the first thing that I saw was one conservative versus 25 LGBT activists. In my head, I was like, I know the conservative talking points, I know the LGBT talking points, and I could kind of have a nuanced take on both of those ideas. And so I publicly applied to that one, and they get hundreds, if not thousands, of applications. Somehow my application got through, and they were talking to me. And I'm pretty sure I mentioned Michael Knowles in my application, not knowing that it was him, because the hard thing about Jubilee is that you don't know who you're talking to and you don't know about what topics. All you know is one conservative versus 25 LGBT activists. And so I think in my application, I listed the conservatives that I used to talk to or that I used to listen to, that I knew their arguments. And so I think that set off some sort of tripwire to like accelerate me to the front. Um, After a public application is accepted, they go to kind of a casting call where they ask you a few different questions while they're recording, get your response so they can figure out, is this person good on camera? Can they make points? How do they deal with new questions that are coming up? They like they liked me then. They gave you a whole $50 travel stipend to get to LA. In my case, I had to fly. And so like the $50 doesn't even cover the flight there. But at that point on YouTube, I was making enough money that I could pay for my flights based off of the people that were supporting me. So I spent all of my YouTube money for a month to get out to LA for that one. Debated Michael Knowles and loved the experience. Him and I have been talking since, and I was actually just talking to his producers this week about potentially being on his program. Um, that I have all sorts of thoughts on that, but to accelerate the story, then 2 months later or a month later, then I see one Christian versus 25 atheists. I put in my application, and I think I went way too dense on it and way too technical because nobody ever replied to it. And then I had a friend who said, just put in a second application, dumb it down, make sure that the casting director knows what you're talking about. So I put in a slightly less technical one, got into that particular episode based off of their casting questions. I had a hunch that it was Peterson because in the casting questions, it wasn't like Kalam or the argument from morality or like a lot of the traditional apologetic talking points. Like there's only one person who talks this way, and that's Jordan Peterson. So I did prep for that. I'd read all of his books, and then we debated him, and his career has not imploded is too strong of a word. The right's belovedness around him has significantly waned, perhaps is a more technical way of describing it. But yeah, so that's kind of the how those two debates came out. I'm happy to dive in if you have actual questions on them or thoughts. I have
Sure.
many thoughts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll dive into all of it. How many hours did you prepare, would you estimate, for Michael Knowles versus debating for or preparing for Jordan
Yeah.
Peterson?
If I count all of the podcasts that I listen to while driving or while running or doing the dishes and phone calls that I had with friends where I was like, role play this particular talking point, or I'm going to be the conservative talking point, you give some pushback. For Knowles, I probably put in 30 or 40 hours. And with Peterson, I probably put in 40 or 50. Which sounds like a lot, but it wasn't like I'm sitting down, like dedicating days to talking or to thinking about these issues. But by the time you watch videos in the car and run and talk to friends, it's probably somewhere around then. The hard part with Knowles is that I prepared for a very different person, and so when Michael Knowles walked in, and this is a good point to make. on the actual episodes, you don't know who you're talking to until literally they walk in and sit down and the cameras are rolling. So the first time you know who you're talking to is while the cameras are on. And so with Knowles, I prepared for the wrong person. He walked in, and I knew I was going to perform well because with a Catholic background, I was going to know his talking points, and thought I did well ish on the Knowles one. With the Peterson one, I'm very glad that I got the right person. Not that I wouldn't have been prepared for the other people, but Peterson's a sort of very slippery fish that you have to really think about. And I'd read all of his books, and in his books actually helped me deconstruct. But I was very glad that all of my prep paid off for Peterson, and I did incrementally better with Peterson than I did with Knowles.
Okay, now I'm curious, who were the people that you prepared for in place of these 2?
So with Knowles, I thought it was going to be Andrew Wilson was the person, and so I listened
Mm.
to a ton of his content, a ton of his debates, and was workshopping his points. Um, and in not that it was all a waste, where a lot of the things that Wilson talks about are common conservative anti-LGBT talking points. And actually doing the prep is I have prepped other people who have now gone into debate Andrew Wilson one on one. I'm sort of in like generally left wing debate spaces. I'm the Andrew Wilson expert, which is a title that like I've never wanted, but I got to do something with that 40 hours of my life that I'll never get back listening to Wilson. Um, so that's who I prepared for instead of Knowles. And then Knowles walked in. I was like, okay, so this will be good. With Peterson, though, I was expecting it to be maybe Clifford Stewart or Sean McDowell or somebody like that, or maybe even Trent Horn. But Trent's been trying to get on for forever and somehow can't get on. But with Peterson, all of my work was or all of my prep was for Peterson, and it ended up being Peterson, which was thank the heavens, or I should say, thank the scientific method.
Mm. What surprised you the most about both those interactions?
Uh, what surprised me both is the level of preparation, where Knowles was very, very prepared coming into his episode. I could tell he had blocked out multiple days rehearsing for that format. At certain points, was very clearly hitting like pre-rehearsed talking points, and he was waiting for the right person to essentially unleash them on. Because if you look at the clips that Knowles pulled from the debate, are only with the trans women. Like he didn't pull clips from anybody else talking to any of the guys. And so seeing Knowles perform, he performed incredibly well. Like he knew the format, he knew the optics of it, he knew how to get clips, he knew how to when he had a formidable opponent, he kind of made the conversation boring and tried to run away to essentially run out the clock. And then when people weren't performing well, that's when he doubled down and like got his one-liners in. So watching Knowles debate, I was like, this guy really knows what he's doing. His opinions, I think, are complete BS, but he's a fantastic debater and had really, really prepared for the format and knew where he was. With Peterson, though, eh, I'm convinced that with Peterson, somebody's getting fired from his team for what happened. And what I mean by that is it's clearly had negative effects on his career, a bit of an embarrassment for what he's doing. And a lot of people have been trying to blame Jubilee, which is as many criticisms as I might have about Jubilee. Jubilee is very upfront with their guests as to what they're getting into. The format before Peterson came on, there was a ton of other surrounded episodes where it wasn't like surrounded was a new format and Peterson got ambushed. Like Jubilee is very clearly a thing and communicated that to Peterson. But what I'm convinced happened is that whoever from the Daily Wire producing team was like, Michael Knowles has been on, Ben Shapiro's been on, let's get Jordan Peterson on. Peterson essentially showed up looking a little bit haggard. He didn't seem to exactly know where he was. It was apparent that he'd never watched a Surrounded episode 4 and just wasn't ready for the format. Um, it just seems like when you have a schedule that busy, you have handlers that just tell you where to show up. Right? Like Peterson doesn't know his own tour schedule. He has people that set that up, and then he essentially shows up and performs. And so I think he just thought that this was going to be another generic media appearance, and it didn't seem like he prepared hardly at all for the episode. So both with Knowles and Peterson, the level of over and under preparation, I think was the most surprising part.
Yeah, and how long are you guys actually in there?
Um, so the shoot itself for Surrounded, from the time we arrive to the time we leave, is like 3-ish hours. The actual runtime is closer to maybe 2 hours. So specifically on Surrounded, they cut it down to an hour and a half, which means they're keeping in 50 to 75% of things that were said. And I've never heard complaints from anybody on like, oh, they took out my point here, or like they made me look bad. Like they do a really good job because like the filming to publishing ratio is pretty close. Versus like for middle ground, the guys that I know who've been on, they'll film for like 5 hours and they cut it down to a 45-minute segment, which means they have to cut so much off that people are unhappy with more with like the middle ground episodes. But with Surrounded, I've always been happy with how they cut.
Oh, that's interesting. And if I was even as a skilled debater as you or the other people there, as prepared, I'd still be super nervous.
Oh yeah.
Did you feel that at all? Or and did you feel that same sort of temperature within the room itself?
Mhm. I think Jubilee's invented a sort of extreme sport around debate where debates in of themselves are nerve-wracking. But you know it's going to be seen by maybe a few thousand people, or if you're in high school debate, like there's an auditorium. But with Jubilee, it's like between 1 and 20 million people are going to see how you perform. And so leading up to it, once you sign up, I think both of them we knew I don't know 2 months before the actual date, and so your brain, your lizard brain is always aware of the fact that in 60 days we're gonna have millions of eyeballs on how I perform. And I'm never an anxious person. I don't consider myself an anxious person. I don't worry. But what happens is a lot of you stress where you go, this is a big deal. Like, objectively speaking, millions of people are going to see how I perform. And there's a ceiling to how well I can perform, and there is no bottom to how poorly I can perform. And a lot of the clips that go viral from Surrounded are people looking terrible. And so you have to go, like, this is a big deal. And then not go like, oh, so my life is ruined if I do poorly, or so let me stress about it. But you go, I need to prepare. I need to think about this. I need to like get my ducks in a row. I need to do work. And so kind of that the threat that that my lizard brain perceives just forces me to hyper focus. And so leading up, it is like reading all of these books, and my memory is on overdrive. Talking to friends, kind of like rehearsing possible talking points. Because the crazy thing is, you show up and you don't know what's going to be debated. You know the topic, but you don't know the particular claims and the studies. And so there's a million different ways it could play out. And then like um, the week of, it's kind of hard to get work done because you keep thinking like I need to prepare more. There's always new ideas that could come out there. And then the day of, from like the time you wake up at 7 until 3 p.m. when the shoots tend to be, just nothing happens. Like I've tried to hang out with friends. I've tried to like get work done, and just your brain is not going to think about anything else because there's this existential threat that your brain perceives. And so just kind of like rehearse, but you also know like you can't cram study for these. And so just kind of like a day of almost being in purgatory leading up. And then the actual shoot is this crazy adrenaline rush where your brain is firing on all cylinders. Both seeing two of the people that I've looked up to for years and have seen, and are probably fanboy over them in any like non-debate context. Like if I saw them on the street, I'd be like, oh my gosh, like that's Jordan Peterson. I might disagree with him on stuff, but like I've read all his books. I've listened to him for years. When the opponent walks in, you don't have time to think about being a fanboy. It's just like, this is just a person. Like they've said these things and they have this platform, this reach. It's just like, this is the person who will determine how I'm seen in the eyes of millions and millions of people. And so watching the episodes after, then I'm like, oh my gosh, like I get to talk to Jordan Peterson, Michael Knowles. But in the actual episodes, it's just like, this is a person. And then sitting down at that chair, um, the world essentially just gets shut off. Like there, you do not see or hear anything outside of talking to the person. I don't keep track of the flags on the outside. It's just like your brain is locked in. It's firing on all cylinders. And the weird thing is that you have an incredibly foggy brain where like you're firing on all cylinders, but at like 20% capacity. And all that's happening is you're going off of instinct, which is why I think a lot of people perform poorly, where even if you've rehearsed the lines, even if you know the arguments, you can't think long enough to like recall that unless it's really at the top of your mind and these arguments are ingrained in you. And so my memory of them is, you get in, you're arguing based off of instinct, you have no clue where anything is going, and you sit down and then you go, what did I just say? And then the rest of the night, you're like trying to piece back together that conversation in your head. Like, did I do well? Did I do poorly? What things was said? What things weren't said? What could I have done better? And it's like, oh my gosh, like I forgot, like there was that exchange too. And like also, like we said that it's this weird like uncovering of memories after it's done because in the actual moment, your brain is just not it's not out of like an extreme stress. And there's people that go up there that they'll cut from these episodes and they'll go up and they'll just sit there and can't talk. Like they'll just not even be able to begin a sentence because it is such a nerve-wracking thing. And not in this and some people take it and they get emotional, which getting emotional means you're gonna have less of your brain that you have available. I like to stay calm, and the whole time I'm just listening for like what is the central question being asked? Like what is it that what central contention is actually the hinge of this conversation? And then also in that format, you're playing a very delicate balance of you can't let the other person talk until they're done, because then they're gonna go on an 8-minute spiel, especially with Peterson. So you have to interrupt them at some point, and that's part of the format. But if you interrupt too much, then you're gonna look bad, and you also don't get to hear their point. And so it's a very careful tango of like jumping in at the right moment before they get on to the next point to then like address that, but not jumping in too early because then you're gonna look bad. And then when they jump back in, it's like, am I going to keep talking to finish my point, or am I going to like hand this back over? It's like a weird dance that you do in it's in such a fast paced format.
That sounds horrifying, and but you go back on, they asked you again.
Oh yeah, it's an extreme sport where it is an adrenaline rush. The same thing like jumping out of out of a plane to go skydiving or rock climbing. Like it's Jubilee's almost like you're playing with cobras, where you have kind of the snake in the middle that like you're dancing with, and you know the snake can bite at any point. Like it is an emotional rush, but it's super rewarding. The same way that like rock climbing with extreme heights is fun, like because it's dangerous. I think Jubilee's fun because it is your brain firing on all cylinders, and I love that experience of everything in the world does not matter on that day. Family and friends and work and everything, it's to the side. It's just you in this high stakes format, and I love it. And that's where I think a lot of people they care about an issue and so they think they should debate it. And it's like no. Like debate is a skill, and just because you care about an issue doesn't mean that you have to debate it. Like there's so many things you can do to champion a cause that don't involve debating. But if you are good at debate, like it is a skill. It is something that I always try to get better at. There's bad moments, there's good moments, and it's fun. Like that adrenaline rush, the adrenaline dump, and then kind of the camaraderie from people afterwards, where you start a group chat, or a lot of the times we go out to dinner afterwards. And then as the episode gets ready to air, it's like, how's this going to play out? Everybody's kind of like, what's going to be the public reaction? And then you see it, and then it's been fun with the other guys behind the scenes, like, oh yeah, you popped up on this channel, and then somebody's like, oh, and Cade, like you popped up on this channel, and then I'll find somebody else who popped up on a different channel. So it's a super fun experience. I love it. Some people hit it for the first time, like after the Knowles episode. A lot of those people never want to be on Jubilee again because it is such an emotional thing. I love it, but in the same way that like skydiving's not for everyone.